Hi, Casey. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name's Kaci Hines, and I'm a seventh and eighth grade science teacher at Shelby West in Kentucky, but formerly an education director at Space Center Houston for 5 years. But all things education is what I'm about, and I love to integrate space into that.
What is it like being back in the classroom?
It's been interesting because of coronavirus and what that's done to education with virtual and now back in the classroom, but we're masked up and just with the kiddos not really being in a really normal learning environment for 18 months has been very different. It definitely has some challenges, but the good thing is I think kids are eager to have structure and learn in that formal classroom setting again. So we're getting there. It's going to take probably years to get where we need to be, if I'm honest. But I think there's lots of opportunities for positive change and positive growth within our education system. And yeah, I'm back to nerding out with my teacher friends, asking for advice on units, how to integrate space and STEM, robotics, everything. So it's like riding a bike, it comes back. And I think there's a lot of neat opportunities now 5 years later that I can get into and get my students engaged with. So lots of opportunities.
Now, my original plan for this project was to go interview people at Starbucks and on the street and ask them, do you know we're going back to the moon and things like this. And I did that for a lot of the interviews, all of them from like December to the coronavirus lockdown. And of the people I talked to on the street, I would say 80% of them didn't know we were going back to the moon. I was kind of curious, in terms of your students, the seventh and eighth graders you teach, what percentage of them do you think know that we're going back to the moon versus not?
Well, prior to me, I would say probably close to zero. I think they have very little background knowledge with space, at least where I'm at. It's just different. It's agricultural focused. It's not space heavy. So that's, again, talk about those opportunities down the road. But yeah, I think most kids don't know much about the history of going to the moon, and they definitely aren't aware that that's the goal by 2024.
Whenever you bring it up in class and talk about it, I'm sure you're very enthusiastic. It's been my experience that people kind of mirror the enthusiasm of the speaker. What's your sense of how the students feel about it?
Well, I think there's that excitement of, okay, we're going to do this, but I don't quite think they truly grasp it. They need those relevant connections to why it matters to them. And that's what we're building on throughout this year is why is space relevant? How does it impact your daily lives when it's not something that's been present before? And I think that's a big thing with the whole public being aware of going back to the moon is understanding the connections, learning about NASA spinoffs. How does NASA technology impact our daily lives? Why is that so important? And then from there, you can build on, well, this is why we're going back to the moon. And these are the opportunities that can benefit all of humankind if we invest our resources, both people and technology, into that goal. So I think it really comes down to a lot of education from littles all the way up to adults.
I think, human space flight, it seems kind of difficult to justify without really being kind of like a believer in humanity spreading out throughout the solar system and beyond. And, I don't think we have kind of that belief as a society as a whole that humanity should kind of branch out. In fact, I've talked to a number of people who actually think it would be kind of good if humanity stayed on Earth and then spoil the rest of the solar system or beyond. I was wondering, what's your sense of like the students you teach and the people you interacted with at Space Center Houston, the educators and just people in society, if you think, there's the potential that people would actually kind of accept that as a vision, or do you think that maybe it's not possible?
Well, I think again, it all boils down to education and making that relevant to an everyday person's life. Like, why is that important? But I think it is very important. And again, I think it boils down to those spin-offs to how the technologies that we've developed for the harshest environments that we know of, the coldest and the hottest, the radiation and, atmospheric pressure, or, all those little things when we're trying to, let's say, go back to the moon and live and work there. Those are the most extreme environments known to a human being. And so the technology that's going to be developed and encouraging those careers is what we need to do and talk about and spread the word. Because it's all very exciting once you get down to that nitty gritty. But again, just making it relevant and important to the everyday person is definitely the biggest challenge. I know NASA tries, and even other space agencies, because sending that New Horizon to Pluto, that was groundbreaking, and people did get pretty jazzed about that. But it's, you read Alan Stern's book and you just see all the obstacles you have to go through for years and years, and just all the lessons learned there too are really important. It's not easy. We all know space isn't easy, but they don't understand those lessons learned and how it helps us grow as human beings. And then when we get those accomplishments, it's like, oh my gosh, we did that as human beings. So I think it's always going to boil down to education and exciting, like the teachers like me, exciting teachers, so they can spread it down to youth as well. So there's a lot of potential there.
I actually had the pleasure of listening to Alan Stern present at a conference recently. I went to the Interstellar Symposium in Tucson, Arizona a few weeks back, and he was there with a company called Helicity Space, which is working on a fusion nuclear, a fusion plasma drive. And he was talking about how like New Horizons is like the fastest object ever launched. And it still took 10 years to get to Pluto.
Yep.
I mean, and it took 3 days for Neil and Buzz to go from Earth to the moon. The New Horizons probe took 8 hours to make that same trip, just to kind of give an idea on how fast it was going.
That's crazy. Crazy cool, though.
It is. But, whenever you think about, starting a project that's going to take 10 years to actually get to the interesting part of it, whenever you actually get to Pluto, and making sure that vehicle is able to withstand that long. I mean, people don't even keep their computers for 10 years or their cars,
Exactly. And then you think of all the years of leading up to that, like takes 10 years to get there. And I forget how long from inception of the design, and this is what we're going to do, to proposals getting approved, to budget, to building, to testing. Like, it's like your child just went to college, and they're off doing the thing. So it's such a life investment to explore, I think, even further out than, the moon. I mean, definitely that's hard too. I'm not saying diminishing that at all, but you want to go further. I mean, you got to know you're going to be committing a huge chunk of your life to that baby for sure.
Yeah, and now there's this Breakthrough Starshot project that's looking at sending a 1 gram probe to Alpha Centauri at at 20% the speed of light, and they think they would have it there in 30 years from now till launch, and then 20 years of transit. Anyway, it's
that's so cool. I'll have to look up that one.
Yeah. Well, how do you think we connect people to sort of this excitement and get them excited about it? I mean, like, for example, we had that Inspiration 4 mission. A lot of people seem to, I think, connected a lot better to that, thinking, hey, these I could have been, Chris or
Mm-hmm.
Cyan or, or Haley, but they're just like me, everyday people, non-billionaires.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
is it just a matter of doing
I,
more things like that?
I think so. I think it's definitely generating a lot of interest. Like it's making, morning shows in the news to where it's in front of people more. SpaceX, you know, landing on land and landing on a barge, then, two land, multiple, we're using these rockets multiple times, then the crewed missions, then the private missions. You've got Blue Origin, you've got, Virgin. All this is making national news, both positively in giving access, but also you have the people saying like, hey, we should focus on Earth and focus on solving world hunger and all these things, which I totally agree with as well. We have a lot of business to take care of at home, but I think it's that education piece of understanding these people aren't just building rockets for the sake of like, hey, I want to go up and come back down. Like, again, the technologies where we push the envelope in the aerospace industry does help benefit all of us, but they don't see the connection how and why. And so what would be really awesome is, in my opinion, is if these companies did more to connect the education piece to all of these flights and all of these missions so that the public can, because they're watching and people want to watch and they're gaining major network access. It's like, okay, now's your opportunity to tie in the education piece to inspire the young kiddos, but also educate the public, the voters, the taxpayers, which aren't paying for those private ones, but help them understand and support NASA missions to say, okay, this is why we should invest and why we should support and why we should educate. So I think it's a great platform, but I don't see a lot of investment in education. I think Blue Origin has a club for education, like kind of some outreach, but I think it can be magnified to a whole nother level. SpaceX could do, I'm sure, so much. I don't know anything that they really do, or even Virgin. So it's just like, okay, you're doing all this wicked cool stuff and people are watching, but your future workforce, if you want to keep this going, are in our classrooms. So what are we doing to inspire them, to educate them and get them on that STEM pathway so that they're working for you and we're going further and farther and doing incredible things down the road.
I think a lot of it maybe just getting them physically involved. I've talked to a number of people in Brownsville in high school who get to go on tours of SpaceX facility down there, actually
Nice.
building the Starship. And they've actually been multiple times and seen it kind of develop over the years. So they definitely have awesome. a strong connection to it.
That's good.
And
I didn't know that. So that's awesome.
I wonder if just taking kids on more field trips to actually see a launch or see a rocket being built and a test firing of an engine and just like the kind of like the awe of seeing it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no doubt that would inspire kids. But that's, again, localized to whoever's in that community. I mean, I couldn't get a busload of kids and take them, to Kennedy or Houston, within that relative circumference of, where can we get to in a day and back? And then the immense amount of fundraising if you did want to go to somewhere and see a launch or see something cool. So proximity is helpful for sure. But then how do we give access to, millions of kids?
Yeah. And what are your thoughts about that? Like, are there any platforms you see that teachers knew about would be like the key? I mean, I talk to a lot of teachers and, unless they have a personal passion about space, it's really not something that they engage with in their classroom.
Yeah, and that is tough. And a lot of those teachers that are just like over the moon excited, those are the ones that have a passion, whether it's for space or something else. I've seen some amazing Harry Potter classrooms And that brings the kids in like no other. They're really, really cool. But yeah, it always starts with your passionate educator. And then if your educator knows where to go in regards to resources like Kaci, ISS National Lab, getting plugged in with them, they have really great opportunities. I've been involved with them for years, getting an ISS above and bringing those pieces to your classroom. We got Genes in Germs in Space from Dream Up, working with those activities. They'll be culturing bacteria and connecting that to space station. So, and Space Foundation, teacher liaisons, there's a lot of different organizations, Space Camp, another one, that you get plugged in and get those experiences, then yeah, you're going to be all hyped up, jazzed up, ready to go, and you look for those connections. But again, just like you said, if they're not plugged in and they don't know where to go, space can be intimidating. I mean, I didn't like space till I went to space camp in 2010, and I had to teach it, and I hated teaching space because the kids had a million questions. I didn't grow up loving space. I didn't know anything about spatial launches, or even saw one on TV. I grew up in Southern Illinois where just like it wasn't a big deal. And then I go to space camp, and that as an educator, because of Honeywell sponsoring these teachers, and I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm inspired. Now I'm going to go look up all the answers to these questions. Now I can't wait for that unit. Now I integrate it into every aspect of what I do. So just like with kids, even adults and teachers, it just takes one experience to change their life. And doesn't matter where you're at in your life, and you can change yourself for the better and change and inspire others along that pathway as well.
Yeah, I mean, I also, do the North Houston Space Society chapter.
Mm-hmm.
You came and spoke at, I think it may have been the last in-person meeting before COVID, actually.
Oh man, and I still have your poster. It's on my wall in my classroom, that SpaceX poster with the car and the spaceman.
That is awesome. If you wouldn't mind, send me a picture of it sometime.
Yes, I will send you a picture of it, because the kids walk by it and I was like, oh yeah, that's so